Hello and welcome back to our final session of today's Training Industry Leader Talk, AI Enhanced Learning Experiences, sponsored by Adobe, CGS Immersive, ELB Learning, Sheer, IMC, and SweetRush. So I am Liz Spate, the Events Marketing Specialist here at Training Industry, and I'm thrilled to have you with us here today. Again, before we get started, I would like to go over a few housekeeping items to help you interact with our speaker and get the most out of today's program. So feel free to continue to use that chat window for any comments and questions. All questions will be answered during the event as well as some time at the end. So keep those questions plugged throughout. And before we close today's program, we would love your feedback. So again, when this session ends, a short evaluation survey will pop open so you can share your thoughts on today's session speaker, but you'll also get in a survey at the end. That will just be overall of the event. So let us know, take this opportunity to let us know your experiences and how we can help shape future events. We would really appreciate your input. And additionally, all of our sessions are being recorded and archived on trainingindustry.com, and you will receive a follow-up email from us that will include the link to the on-demand program for you to share with the team. Now, if this is your first event, again, we would love to welcome you. We exist to make connections among learning and development professionals, and we offer tons of resources to support your role in L&D, like live events like today's Leader Talk, as well as through articles on our website, our magazine, conferences, research reports, and our podcast. We would also love to hear about what you've learned from today's session on social media, so please follow us on your favorite platform so we can continue the conversation. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce you to our final speaker of the day. Justin Seeley is a highly experienced learning and development professional with over 2 decades of online learning and graphic design expertise. Currently, Justin is the e-learning evangelist at Adobe, where his comprehensive knowledge of Adobe products and learning design empowers him to passionately inspire and educate customers about Adobe's dynamic e-learning suite. So with that, Justin, take it away.
All right. Thanks, Liz. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the session. Thank you for hanging out with me. I know it's probably been a long day. I'm the last one, so don't worry. It's almost over. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and my presentation here, if I can find the share button. Let's see. There it is. Okay. And that screen. There we go. Okay. Hopefully everybody can see my screen. Let me pop open the chat. Give me a big yes or no if you can see the big red screen. All right, I see claps, so that means we're probably good to go. Okay. All right. So again, as Liz said, my name's Justin. I am a senior learning evangelist at Adobe, specifically focusing on Adobe Learning Manager. But today, I want to talk to you about rolling out AI-first learning ecosystems. Not just the concept of it, though. I want to talk about the actual work. So we're going to go through like how to plan it, how you build it, how you make it stick with the folks in your organization. So here's what I've seen over the last 2 years. Organizations buy AI tools, they pilot them to a few teams, the tools work, and the people get really excited, and then the pilot ends, and nothing really changes. The tools kind of sit there, the team kind of moves on, and the opportunity really disappears. But the problem is never really the technology. The problem is that we treat AI more like a product instead of a system, and we add it to our stack, and we don't redesign how the learning works around it. So this session is about that redesign. I'm going to walk you through a framework that'll help you see where AI strengthens your learning functions and where it creates problems that you need to solve. I'll show you what each part of that looks like, and I'll give you specific workflows, real examples, and a 90-day action plan that you can start using next week if you want. By the end of this session, I hope that you'll know how to audit your current systems, how to identify where to start, and how to build momentum without needing a massive budget or a complete platform overhaul. So let's get going. And as Liz said, if you have questions along the way, please put them in the chat. I can't see it right now. She'll stop me if it's at a good place. And if not, we'll save them for the end. And I'll be sure to try to answer a few before we end the day. So when I first started working at Adobe and working with all these learning teams that I work with on AI integration, I kept seeing the same pattern. Teams would bring in AI tools and it would light up everything. Insights, content generation, learner analytics, skill mapping, all of that was happening super fast. But that speed didn't really help anybody. The light was too bright, so to speak. It flooded their systems. People didn't know where to look or what to do with all this new capability. AI was really overwhelming more so than it was useful. And that's when I started to realize something. AI, it works a lot like light. It's powerful, but without structure, it just scatters everywhere. What you need is a prism, something that takes the light and separates it into a spectrum that you can actually see and use. So that's what this framework does. It takes AI capability and refracts it into dimensions that you can see, plan for, and build around. And when you pass AI through the right structure, you get clarity. You see where it strengthens your work, and it also will expose gaps that you need to fix. So over the next 38-ish minutes, I'm going to walk you through what that structure looks like and how to use it in practice. But first, we need to understand the problem. Because before we can solve anything, we need to see what AI actually is breaking. So at Adobe Learning Summit last month, I had a conversation with a CLO from a major financial services company, and she had just rolled out a new compliance training program. Every learner passed the final assessment, and their scores were like 90%. And the completion rate was like 98% in the first 2 weeks. But she looked me dead in the face. She said, "This is the best results I've ever seen, but I don't believe it. I don't trust it." And turns out she was right not to, because when her team audited how the learners completed the training, they found that most of them had used AI to answer the quiz questions. So the AI passed. The learners didn't. They just moved on. Nobody really learned anything about the new compliance requirements. And this is the paradox that we're dealing with. AI can pass a test, but it can't make you learn. And here's why that matters. For decades, we've built learning systems around assessments, quizzes, exams, case studies, scenario-based questions. We measure mastery by testing recall and application. And those measurements worked when humans were the only ones taking the tests. But now, AI can ace almost any assessment that you give it. And it can write essays, solve case studies, generate reflection prompts, even simulate emotional intelligence. Not well, but it tries. The output looks like mastery, but no real learning takes place. The learner never really has to think, struggle, or make sense of the material. They outsourced all of the cognitive work. So this affects more than just compliance training, though. It changes how we evaluate capability across entire organizations. If your assessments can be passed by AI, you've lost the signal that tells you whether your people actually know how to do the jobs you're asking them to do. The question that we need to answer is, how do we design learning ecosystems where AI deepens understanding instead of creating shortcuts around it? That's what Prism does. It gives you a structure for building systems where AI strengthens human capability instead of replacing the thinking that builds it. So what we're going to do now is we're going to walk through all of the different refractions of the prism. But first, we need to understand why this problem is getting worse. So every organization that I work with is facing the same problem right now. The speed of business transformation is outpacing the speed of learning. So let me show you what that looks like in practice. A software company launches a new AI-powered customer service platform, for example. That platform goes live in 3 months. The learning team has 6 weeks to train 400 agents on how to use it. Sound familiar? The agents complete the training. 2 months later, the platform gets a major update that changes half the workflows they just learned, and the learning team has to scramble to update the content. But by the time their new training is ready, another update's already been planned. The gap between what people know and what they need to know keeps widening. And that's not necessarily a training problem, that's a system design problem. So if you look at this graph that's on your screen here, we have the organizational learning speed. That's the semi-linear thing on the bottom. And this is the rate at which your people can build new skills, apply them, and reach proficiency. And that curve has been relatively linear for basically the past decade. It's increased a little bit these last few years. Sure, AI has seen an uptick there. But digital upskilling helps, continuous learning ecosystems help, but the growth really has stayed relatively steady. On the other side, you have AI capability growth, and this curve is exponential. Every 6 months or so, the tools get smarter, they get faster, they get more capable. The skills your people learned last year are already outdated, and the half-life of technical skills today, they're not measured in years anymore. They're measured in months and sometimes even weeks. The space between those two curves is what we call the capability gap. And that gap represents the difference between what your organization can do and what your people are ready to do. And the gap is widening faster than most learning functions can respond. McKinsey recently reported that fewer than 1% of companies believe their learning ecosystems are ready for AI integration. That stat alone tells you something really important. Most learning teams are operating inside systems that were designed for a world with stable skills and predictable roles, and those systems just can't keep up anymore. So, how do we start to close that gap? You need a framework that helps you see where to focus, what to build, and how to connect the pieces into something that actually works. And the framework that I've used is called PRISM. It stands for people, reflection, infrastructure, systems, and mindset. So think about what happens when you pass white light through a prism. The light doesn't disappear, it separates into a spectrum. Each color was always there. The prism just makes it more visible. AI works the same way in your organization. The raw capabilities are already there. Pattern recognition, content generation, data analysis, all of it is available right now. But without structure, that capability just floods your systems. People don't know where to start. Teams build duplicate solutions, data sits in silos, projects launch and then stall. The prism is the structure. It takes that raw capability and it refracts it into the 5 dimensions, each dimension representing a different aspect of how learning operates inside your organization. So you've got people, the humans who design, deliver, and use the learning. Their roles are constantly shifting. They need new skills, new tools, and new ways of working with AI all the time. Reflection. That's the space between consuming information and applying it. This is where learning actually happens. AI can certainly speed up delivery, but reflection is what builds true understanding. Infrastructure, those are the data systems, content repositories, integration layers that connect learning to performance. AI only gets smarter when these systems are able to seamlessly interact and talk to each other. Then we have systems, the feedback loops that keep learning adaptive. Traditional learning is transactional. You deliver content, track a completion, move on. AI first systems sense, interpret, and respond continuously. And then finally, we have mindset. This is probably one of the most important. The culture that makes all of this possible. If people are afraid to experiment, they won't use it. If leaders don't model curiosity, teams won't take risks. And if culture determines whether AI amplifies capability, culture determines whether AI amplifies capability or just creates more work. These 5 dimensions are independent, but you can't build intelligent systems without infrastructure. You can't scale infrastructure without the right people, and you can't develop people without the right culture. So we'll walk through each one of these in order, but let's start with one of the most important, the people. Everything starts with people. For the past 20 years, learning teams have been organized around production, course creation, content development, delivery schedules, all that stuff. The work centered on building assets and pushing them out to learners. AI has changed that model. When AI can generate a course outline in 30 seconds or draft a knowledge check in 10 and create on-brand visuals in just a few minutes, production speed stops being the bottleneck. The bottleneck becomes something else. It becomes the ability to architect how learning fits into the flow of work. And here's what I mean by that. So think about what a learning designer, how we used to do things. We used to spend about 60% of our time building content, about 40% of our time thinking about how that content would be used. But now with AI, we could probably flip those percentages. Now we spend maybe 20% of our time generating the initial content, and we could spend about 80% of our time trying to figure out how to design the experiences that help people apply what we're trying to get them to learn. That shift creates new roles inside your learning teams. And let's talk about a few of those. So number one would be an AI learning partner, a person that sits between the learning function and the business. They analyze learner data, performance metrics, and stuff like that, and they use AI to surface patterns and recommend next steps. They're part analyst, part strategist, part learning consultant. Then you got prompt architects, the people that design the questions, scenarios, and decision frameworks that shape how AI generates learning content. They don't write courses necessarily, they write the instructions that help AI write better courses. Then you've got data translators, the people who connect learning analytics to business outcomes, one of the most important things that we can do. They take that completion data, those engagement metrics, and they translate that into language that executives care about, like revenue impact and time to proficiency, capability gaps. The final one is an ethical designer. This person ensures that what we automate remains fair, transparent, and aligned to human outcomes. They ask questions like, is this AI recommendation biased? Does this assessment measure actual capability? Are we designing systems that help people think or systems that think for them? Now, these roles aren't anything like mind-blowing. These roles already exist in some places. They're not theoretical. They're emerging right now in companies that are treating AI as more of a capability amplifier instead of just a human replacement tool. The goal here is to shift your team's focus. Stop optimizing for content production. Start optimizing for capability architecture. When your people understand how to guide AI, they become force multipliers. One designer can do the work that maybe used to take three. One analyst can surface insights that maybe used to take a whole team to surface. But that only works if your people know how to collaborate with it, which brings us to a very practical question. How do you actually build that capability in your team? You start with AI fluency. And I want to reiterate that this is very different from AI literacy. Literacy means that you understand what AI is. Fluency means that you can work with it naturally, reason through its outputs, question its recommendations, and co-create with it in real time. AI fluency isn't just for learning designers either, it's for everybody. Your facilitators have to understand how AI can personalize coaching at scale. Analysts need to know how AI can surface patterns in learner data, and your project managers need to understand how it can accelerate content workflows without sacrificing quality. A practical way to build this would be to create a shared AI sandbox for your team. This is a low-risk environment where people can experiment with specific tools. We had something like this when I worked at Walmart Marketplace. We had an AI sandbox, and basically we were able to go in there and play with a ChatGPT-like interface without worrying about breaking anything in a production system. This gives us real scenarios to test. You can ask the thing to generate learning objectives, build a course outline, create assessments, analyze a data set, and then you can see what works and what doesn't. After a few weeks, you'll start to see patterns. Some people are going to naturally gravitate towards prompt design, making sure that the communication between them and the AI is the best it can be. Other people are going to focus on that data analysis, and others will experiment with visual content generation. Those natural tendencies tell you where people's strengths are. Use that information to shape how you redefine their roles. Next, pilot a small-scale AI-assisted project. Pick one course that needs to be updated. Use AI to accelerate the content refresh. Have your team document what they learned. So what prompts worked? Where did AI save time? Where did it create more work? What could it do differently or better next time? And then share those lessons openly. Don't treat this like a proof of concept that only exists on your team. Treat it like a learning loop. The goal is to build organizational knowledge about how AI actually performs in the workflows you've already created. Finally, start developing career paths around AI collaboration. Introduce those titles like I just talked about. Make it clear that these aren't separate tracks, they're evolutions of existing roles. A learning designer who builds AI fluency doesn't stop being a learning designer. They just become a more capable learning designer. And this is how you move from experimentation to integration. Your people stop seeing AI as a separate tool. They start seeing it as part of how they work. And once that shift happens, you can really start building reflection into the experience itself. But here's the problem with most systems. They optimize for completion, not thinking. Somebody finishes a module, they pass a quiz, the system marks it complete, everybody moves on. No one really asks if they understood the material. No one checks if they can apply it. No one pauses to ask, hey, what did you learn? Or why did you answer that question that way? Reflection is where learning becomes real. It's the moment when the learner stops, questions what they've seen, and connects it to something they already know. Without that moment, learning is just information transfer. The content goes in, nothing comes out. AI gives us speed, sure. It can deliver content faster than we've ever been able to build content before. But speed alone doesn't build understanding. If anything, speed can make things worse. Learners consume more content they retain less of it, and they never pause long enough to make sense of anything. So we need to design reflection into the workflow, not after the workflow, inside it. Here's what that looks like. Instead of ending a module with a quiz, end it with a reflection prompt. Ask the learner to explain what they just learned in their own words. Ask them to describe a situation where they would use this knowledge, or ask them to identify one thing that surprised or challenged their assumptions. Use AI to respond to those reflections, not with a score, but with more questions. If the learner says, "Oh, I learned active listening really improves how you describe a recent, really improves collaboration," AI might respond with, "Oh, can you describe a recent situation where you used active listening? What happened?" That's Socratic AI. It prompts dialogue instead of just delivering answers. This does two things. First, it forces your learner to think, which is never a bad thing. And second, it creates a record of how they think. And that record becomes valuable when you start analyzing what people are actually understanding versus what they've simply completed. Another example would be a sales team completes training on objection handling. At the end of each module, learners write a reflection about how they would apply the technique to their territory. The prompts are simple. Describe a recent objection you struggled with. How would you handle it differently now? The system then captures that response and the learner moves on. But that reflection built into the workflow, it made the learner have to think. The system captured their thinking, and now the question is, what do you do with that data? Once you've built reflection into the workflow, you have something most learning systems don't, a record of how people are thinking at the moment they were learning something. So what you do with that, the system collects those reflections from hundreds or even thousands of learners across your org. AI analyzes those responses and looks for patterns in reasoning. It might notice that learners in one region are consistently misapplying a concept, or that learners in a specific role are asking the same questions, or that experienced employees are reflecting at a deeper level than new hires. Those patterns tell you where to focus your efforts. This is where reflection really becomes intelligence for the organization. The data doesn't just tell you what people completed, it tells you what they understood. That insight really drives true personalization. The system starts recommending different content to different learners based on how they're thinking, not just what they finished. So let me make this a little bit more concrete. A manufacturing company uses reflective prompts at the end of every safety training module. Learners describe how they would handle specific scenarios on the floor in the manufacturing plant. The AI analyzes those descriptions and flags responses that suggest gaps in understanding. This system automatically assigns follow-up content to those learners before they are allowed to return to the floor. The company could reduce safety incidents by an exponential percentage within a few months, basically, because they caught the gaps before the gaps became real problems. That's a feedback loop in action. Reflection feeds insight, and insight drives improvement, and improvement always restarts the cycle. The system gets smarter as your people learn. And that's what closes the feedback loop inside of an AI first ecosystem. But none of this works without the right infrastructure underneath it. Let me describe the problem with most learning teams. Your learning data lives in your LMS, your performance data lives in your CRM or your HRM. Your content library lives in a separate repository. Your skills data lives in a spreadsheet. Does this sound familiar to anybody? None of these systems talk to each other. When you want to understand how learning impacts performance, you have to export 14 different spreadsheets, clean it up, merge it, hope that the timestamps line up, and by the time you finish all that, the data is already outdated. AI can't fix that problem. AI makes it worse. If your data is siloed, AI just amplifies those silos. It generates insights from incomplete information. It recommends content based on engagement metrics that don't reflect actual capability. It personalizes experiences using data that doesn't connect to business outcomes. Infrastructure is what solves this. When your systems are connected, AI gets smarter. It can see the full picture. It knows what learners completed, how they performed afterward, where they struggled, and what skills they need to develop based on the roles that they're in. That visibility can turn AI from a content generator into a really strategic tool. And here's what good infrastructure looks like. 4 layers working together. A data layer where there's unified access to skills, performance, and engagement data. The content layer, this is where your modular This is where you modularize your learning assets. Instead of building monolithic courses, you build reusable components, a single learning objective, a single knowledge check, a single video. Each component gets tagged with metadata so AI can search, retrieve, and recombine it based on what the learner needs. An integration layer. This is where you connect your LMS to the rest of your tech stack. APIs can link things like the product I work on, Adobe Learning Manager, to other products like Salesforce, Workday, Slack, Teams. Whatever tools your people use every day, learning stops being a separate destination and just flows into those tools that they already work with. Then there's a governance layer. This is where you build transparency and accountability. Who has access to the data? How's it making recommendations? What happens when recommendations go wrong? Governance is not about control, it's about trust. If people don't trust how the systems work, they're not going to use them. When these four layers align together, learning becomes really adaptive. The system can detect a skill gap from performance data, recommend a course in real time, and deliver it inside the workflow, and then track the impact automatically.
So there are actually two good questions that kind of came from
Yeah,
what
let's
we
roll.
talked about. So Holly had asked, so what I'm hearing is more surveys, assessments, evaluations. Is there a risk of survey fatigue or burnout?
I definitely think so. I think that if you think about it in those black and white terms of just like putting an assessment or a survey at the end of every single thing, yes, I think what you have to do, A, is be strategic with where you put them, and then B, as our systems evolve, for example, Adobe Learning Manager, the product I work on, we're working on an AI scenario role play thing that's going to go into ALM very shortly next year. Basically, it's a conversational interface that comes up at the end of a course that's basically a conversation. It's audio based, right? So you talk to the AI, it asks you a few questions, you give it some answers, and it records a lot of stuff about it. I have a video at the very end of this that there's a QR code to show you an example of how it works, but things like that. So I think the tools are going to have to evolve for us to build reflection in truly in a seamless way that doesn't overburden people. But for now, it just depends on the level of complexity of your current system, like what it's able to do from an AI interaction standpoint.
Perfect. Let us know if that addressed your question, Holly. But John had asked, would all of this be the same in a private AI system, just how AI learns from us and adapts to our needs and responses?
I'm assuming by private you mean like your own like LLM or something like that. Clarify me if I'm wrong, but yes, I think it still works the same way, and it's actually probably even more trustworthy because that LLM is probably only trained on your data. So that's actually more safe and secure than many of the systems that would be in play today.
Perfect. Okay, now the questions are really coming in hard. So I will let you go
No
back
problem.
to, and then I'll come back.
All right. So let's get back on track here. Having infrastructure in place is one thing, but making it operational is another. Most organizations build the foundation and then they stop. They connect their LMS to their CRM, they set up the pipelines, they create a content repository, and then they wait for something to happen. I've been at multiple organizations that have done that, but nothing ever really does happen. That infrastructure just kind of sits there. It's technically functional, but strategically inert. And so here's what's missing: activation. You need to turn those connections into workflows that run automatically. So what that might look like is a sales rep closes a deal with an enterprise customer. That event writes something to your CRM. Your CRM is connected to your LMS through an API. And then the LMS detects the deal closure and checks the rep's learning history. It sees they haven't completed the enterprise onboarding module. And then it automatically assigns that module and sends a notification through Slack. That rep completes the training, the system logs the completion, updates the skills profile, sends a summary to their manager. All this happens without anybody having to manually assign anything or tracking progress. This is totally possible today. And that's an activated data pipeline. The infrastructure isn't waiting for somebody to use it, it's responding to business events in real time. So that's something that we should all think about. How can we make these things talk to each other? Because that's what we mean by operationalizing infrastructure. You're not just connecting systems, you're building feedback loops that make learning truly adaptive to what's actually happening in your business. But if infrastructure gives you the foundation, systems are what make it move. Traditional learning systems are transactional, like we talked about before. Deliver the content, learner consumes it, track completion, move on. No feedback loop. System doesn't really learn from what happened, it just delivers the next thing on the list. AI first systems work a lot differently. They sense and interpret and they adapt. They create learning loops that get smarter over time. So, what a learning loop might look like would be first, the system listens, it captures signals from across the organization, learner activity, performance data, things like that. Every interaction then generates a signal. Second, the system analyzes all of that stuff. AI looks at those signals and identifies patterns. It notices that learners in a specific role are struggling with a particular concept, or that training modules correlate with improved performance in a specific region but not another, or that engagement drops off after the third module in a course. Third, the system recommends, based on what it's learned, it suggests next steps. It might recommend a follow-up module, a coaching session, a peer interaction, or a completely different learning path altogether. Then the system measures stuff. It tracks what happens after the recommendation. Did the learner complete what we told it to, what we told them to? Did their performance improve? Did it decline? Did the intervention close the gap? The system learns from its own recommendations and hopefully gets better over time. So here's something that most learning leaders miss, though. AI first learning ecosystems don't work if L&D owns them alone. Learning at scale requires collaborations from across your organization. Content creators, data analysts, business partners, technology teams. If these groups are not working together, your ecosystem is going to fragment. You end up with great content that nobody can find, powerful data that nobody's analyzing, and tools that you don't connect to the workflows people actually use. So let me break down what cross-functional collaboration looks like in practice. Start with content creation. In a traditional model, L&D builds all the learning materials. Instructional designers write courses, graphic designers create visuals. You get the idea. That process doesn't necessarily work in this environment. It's slow and it doesn't scale. And in an AI first model, content creation happens across roles. Product managers can use generative AI to draft training modules on a new feature. A sales leader records a quick video walkthrough and uses AI to generate the captions and a transcript. A data analyst builds a dashboard that teaches people how to interpret metrics. L&D's role is shifting. Instead of creating everything, we become the curators. We become the quality controllers. They ensure that the content aligns to learning objectives, meets accessibility standards, and connects to broader curriculum, sure. Next, the delivery. Learning doesn't just get pushed out from an LMS, it gets embedded into the same places people work. Slack, somebody sees a welcome message with links to onboarding content. A sales rep updates a deal in Salesforce and gets a prompt to complete a training on enterprise accounts. You get the idea. Finally, we have evaluation. In the old model, L&D measured all the learning outcomes, completions, quiz scores, satisfaction surveys. In the cross-functional model, evaluation includes business partners and data teams. You measure capability outcomes. Did the training improve the sales conversion? Did it reduce the time to proficiency? L&D can't answer all these questions by herself. You need data teams to connect learning activity to your business results. You need business partners to define what success looks like for them. So when you design for cross-functional collabs, you break down the silos that slow everything down. Content creation accelerates, delivery becomes contextual, evaluation focuses on impact. Your learning ecosystem then becomes an organizational capability. But how do you run this day to day? Let's talk about what happens. You built the infrastructure, you design the systems, you've got the cross-functional buy-in from everybody, but how do you operationalize it? The real workflow is your customer support team is handling a product launch, let's say. Call volume is 3 times normal. Support platform tracks every interaction. The data shows a spike in questions about a specific feature, and that signal flows into the LMS. AI analyzes that pattern, it identifies the knowledge gap, and it matches it to an existing piece of content in your library. Finds a micro-learning module that covers the feature in question. The system then surfaces that recommendation, pushes the module to the support team through a chatbot before their next shift starts. That recommendation doesn't go straight to production, it goes to your cross-functional team. The L&D lead reviews the content to make sure it's current, the support manager confirms it's the right priority, the data analyst checks whether similar interventions worked in the past. Here's the key though, the deployment happens in context. Support team doesn't get an email saying, hey, please complete this training. They log into their help desk tool and they see a notification saying, new guidance available on feature X. Complete this 5-minute module before your next call. The learning is embedded into the work they're already doing. 2 days later, the system measures what happened, call resolution times improve, escalations drop, team completed their module. That data flows back into the system as well. And the next time a similar spike happens, the system knows exactly what to do. Now, everything we've talked about so far requires one thing to work, a mindset. And that's the last part of the prism. You can build the best infrastructure in the world, but you can't connect, and you can connect every system, but you cannot make any of this matter if the culture doesn't support experimentation. So what I see in organizations that struggle to adopt AI is they treat failure as a problem instead of a signal. Somebody treats a new AI, or somebody tests a new AI tool, it doesn't work properly. Leadership asks why they wasted time and money on it, and the team stops. Experimenting, innovation just shuts down. So what I've seen is that when people succeed, they treat failure as just another data point. Somebody tests a tool and it doesn't work, the team documents what happened and they share their findings with everybody in the organization. And they just move on. No one gets penalized for trying. Curiosity becomes normal. That difference is everything. AI first learning ecosystems require a culture where people feel safe, asking questions, testing ideas, and learning in public. So they need a couple of things for this to happen. One is psychological safety. People have to feel safe exploring new tools without fear of judgment or ridicule. Number two, transparencies. Leaders have to communicate how and why AI is being used. They explain which decisions are automated and which ones require human judgment. Experimentation. Teams are encouraged to test ideas quickly. You've probably all heard the old thing, move fast and break stuff. That's what we have to do in this day and age. Learning agility. Curiosity is treated as a strength, not a distraction. People who ask, well, what if questions, they get rewarded. People who challenge assumptions get heard. They get a seat at the table. And leaders have to model this behavior. When these four ingredients are present, learning becomes part of the organizational DNA. People don't wait for permission to try something new. They don't hide behind the process when something doesn't work. They learn with AI instead of just learning about it. But mindset doesn't change just because you talk about it. It changes because you design for it. So here's how to activate that mindset across your org. Start at the top. Leaders set the tone. If your CLO or VP of learning isn't experimenting with AI, nobody else is going to either. They need to model the behavior publicly. That means using AI in their own work, sharing what they've learned, and admitting when something doesn't work. Oops. So we've walked through all 5 dimensions of the prism. Now let's talk about how they all come together. In this AI first learning ecosystem, it doesn't run on a single platform. It's layers, like you see here on the screen. Layers that all work together. Every layer has a role. When the layers connect, you get the system that learns, adapts, and scales. So here we have, foundational models, the LLMs. So this could be like your private LLM that we were talking about earlier, something like IBM Granite or Copilot, whatever the case may be. Then you've got your learning management system, like Adobe Learning Manager, that orchestrates the learning skills and personalization and pushes it across all the ecosystems. Systems like Adobe Firefly are able to produce brand safe creative content. And then we use the Prism framework to align our people, systems, culture, all for the idea of AI first learning. Now, again, this is a conceptual model. This is not a formal integration list necessarily, but this is how you can think about it moving forward. The ecosystem has to be in harmony, though. An ecosystem like this doesn't appear overnight. It grows. It starts when you connect a few tools, link some data sources, and run a pilot with a small team. Foundation models provide the intelligence layer. Learning systems orchestrate data. Generative tools accelerate content creation. Cultural frameworks like Prism align people, processes, and purpose. Then the continuous flow of data connects every layer to a living learning network. Now, you're probably sitting there and you're like, man, this sounds great, dude. How do I actually do it though? Well, here's a 90-day plan that you can use to build momentum without overhauling your whole learning function. So start with phase 1, audit and align. This is days 0 through 30. Your goal is to understand what you already have and where the biggest opportunities are. So map your current systems. Where does learning data live? Where does performance data live? Which systems need to talk to each other? Identify where AI is already touching your workflows. Are people using it to generate content? Are they analyzing stuff? Document what's happening so you know what to build on. Then find one problem that matters to the business. Don't pick the biggest one. Pick one that's small enough to test in 30 days, but visible enough that people will notice if you solve it. Maybe it's a compliance training course. Maybe it's a sales onboarding program. Maybe it's a skills gap that's slowing down product launches. Finally, define the business metrics that connect back to that outcome. Don't just measure completions and stuff like that. If you're updating compliance training, measure where incident rates drop or something like that. That's phase one. You're not building anything yet. You're just creating clarity about where to focus. Phase two, pilot and learn. This is day 31 through 60. Now you build something small. Launch one AI assisted learning initiative on what you identified in phase one. Use AI to accelerate content creation or personalize learning paths or analyze reflection data. Pick one use case and run with it. Capture everything that happens. Record what worked and what didn't. Document where it saved you time. Track learner feedback, all of that stuff. Share your findings openly with your organization. Don't wait until the pilot is finished to communicate what you're learning. That's phase two. Phase three, scale and sustain. This is 61 through 90. Now you expand what worked. Take the pilot, roll it out to other teams, other regions, other use cases. Don't try to scale everything at once. Scale one thing really well. Integrate it into your core systems and way of working so it becomes part of how work happens, not a separate initiative that people have to remember to use. At the end of 90 days, you won't have a fully built AI first ecosystem, but you'll have the momentum, you'll have the evidence, you'll have that foundation, and you'll have a team that knows how to experiment, learn, and scale. All right, as we round home here, I want to talk briefly about the product that I evangelize for, Adobe Learning Manager. So we covered the Prism framework. ALM has 3 AI features available today that demonstrate how some of these concepts work in practice. The first is AI-powered recommendations in search. So the problem is that most learners face, they log into an LMS, they search for customer service, and they get 47 results. They don't know which course to start with. They don't know which one applies to their role. They waste a lot of time. AI-powered search solves that. When a learner searches for customer service, the system understands its intent. It knows their role, their skill level, all of that stuff, and the results are much more personalized. The recommendations work much the same way. The platform analyzes behavior. It sees patterns. Learners who completed course A and performed well in their role also completed course B, etc., and it serves up content proactively. Something we're working on that's going to launch in early 2026 is the Learner Assistant. It's going to be a platform that opens anywhere that you want it to. It can be across the web, mobile, whatever. And you could type in things like, what should I learn to prepare for a leadership role? The assistant responds based on what they know about the current person's skill level profile, learning history, competencies, all that stuff. It can suggest learning paths, courses, all of that will be available directly in front of the learner. It really accelerates the content discovery engine. Finally, we have the AI admin assistant. This is live today. Managing the learning platform, always involves hundreds of tasks and all that stuff. This really takes a lot of that off your plate by allowing you to ask real world questions about, hey, how do I do X inside this LMS? And then this is the big one. If you want to scan this QR code on your screen, it will take you to a YouTube video where you can see this in practice. This is the scenario AI role play that I talked about earlier, where you can do real-time conversations with that. And then finally, if you want to connect with me, you have questions about this because I know I'm running out of time, scan that QR code. It'll take you to LinkedIn. I try to answer every message that I get within a reasonable amount of time. So please feel free to reach out to me there. I also do a lot of resources for free, and I have a weekly newsletter that I would love to share with you there as well. With that said, I think I might have a minute or two left to answer some questions.
Yes, I was going to say there were a couple of questions that are a little bit lengthy, but we can try to scram through at least
Sure.
kind of top level. So there was a question, how do you intend to make Adobe InDesign to help operational AI for the typesetting process, which helps in laying out content for print products? And then there was kind of a part question with, can interactivities be introduced to produce both print and digital content from Adobe InDesign?
I will be very honest and say I don't know. I don't work on the Creative Cloud team, unfortunately. But send me that question on LinkedIn and I will connect you with one of the evangelists on the Creative Cloud team that can answer that question.
Perfect, perfect. Sylvie asked, what is the role of HR to prioritize the skills that need focus?
Yeah, I think the role of HR is going to be pretty big because, L&D, oftentimes we don't own the talent management side of things. So the HR systems and the data that they collect and maintain is going to be very essential to this. So having that cross-functional collaboration between the two functions is going to be extremely essential, especially if you can get the two systems talking to each other, and then that way the LMS, for example, can receive some of those skill data, and then you can have conversations about it with each other with the same data points in front of one another. Extremely important. I think that the HR role will actually expand when it comes to L&D over the next 3 to 5 years.
Perfect. And we are at time, but Tim, I did see your question, and I feel like this could be totally top level to some degree, but pretty much was just like, you've sold me. This is great. Is the system you're suggesting affordable to a small company of 5,000 employees? But more so, how do I get leadership interested? So loaded question, but
Sure. So, if by system you mean Adobe Learning Manager, I think you probably have to talk to a sales rep about that. The cost is always based on user size, but I do know that we work with companies big and small. We have Microsoft, and then we have small mom and pop shops that use it as well. So, that's something that I can definitely connect you to the right person on. As far as getting executive buy-in. Again, if you want to connect with me, I can give you a template that I've created for how to get executive buy-in on this. It's a worksheet that you can fill out, and then it also helps guide your conversations with them.
perfect. We are out of time, but Justin, there were a few people that said that first QR code, the one about, I think it was the simulation. So not this one that you're
Oh,
sharing.
AI roleplay doesn't work?
Yes. So if you could drop that link in the chat, that'd be like
Yes,
super
I will.
helpful. So while he's doing that though, thank you so much, Justin. This was such a great way to wrap us up for the day. I feel like it was a very refreshing AI conversation, and I hope everybody got something out of it. But with that, it is the end. We made it. So thank you all again for our dynamic speakers and sponsors like Adobe, CGS Immersive, ELB Learning, Sheer, IMC, and SweetRush. Again, all of our sessions are pre-qualified for a credit hour by SHRM, HRCI, ISPI, and CPTM. So send an email to me or anybody on the TI team, and we will send you those codes, which I will drop my email in the chat right now. Additionally, TICE 2026 is your chance to discover fresh ideas, build lasting connections, and explore the latest in L&D. So right now, if you register now up until December 31st, you can get $400 off. So I would love to see you all there. Additionally, leading and direct change by making agile transformation a top priority in your organization. It's innovative and aligning recruiting and onboarding processes to build a strong learning culture. And you can obtain this competitive advantage by earning your Agile certification for HR and L&D. Again, one last reminder, that survey will pop open in another tab in your browser upon exiting, and we would greatly welcome your feedback. Again, thank you all for joining us again today. Until next time, I am Liz, this is Justin, and I hope you have a wonderful day, everybody. Have a good
Thanks,
weekend,
everybody.
and I'll see you soon.